Hello students, we're going to be talking about reproduction over the next couple of videos. This first one is going to focus mostly on female reproduction. A lot of this is going to be incredibly complex, and I'm not going to get into the actual basics of a large number of these things as far as the physiology side goes. But in order to understand a lot of the terminology, you're going to need to understand the physiology as well. So, as far as the anatomy and physiology goes, the primary organ of the female reproductive system is the ovary. You can see ovaries right over here. They're connected to the rest of the accessory organs, which include the fallopian tubes, the uterus. The vagina is at the internal portion, and then there's also the vulva, which is the opening in the outside, or to the outside. Oftentimes, vagina and vulva get conflated with each other when people are talking about it in a wider variety of terms. The labia are the lips on the outside, which is literally what labia means, and then the clitoris is the erectile tissue of female anatomy. Female reproductive system produces ova, or an ovum, and that leads to reproduction, so fertilization, which occurs in the fallopian tubes or possibly in other places, causing an ectopic pregnancy. Fertilized ova then move into the uterus and implant into the uterine wall. If there is no fertilization, then the uterine lining is shed through a process called menses, which gives us the term menstruation, or it's just commonly referred to as one's period. The system also produces sex hormones, and we'll talk about those in a couple of slides. So the main different types of things that you need to go through, I actually already talked about most of that. The plural of ovaries or of ovary is ovaries. They are oocytes, so oo, it isn't oo, it's oo. Oocytes, meaning egg cells. There's also a variety of other different types of things that can happen throughout this whole entire process, and a couple of other different parts. The mons pubis, literally means the mount of the pubis, is a fatty tissue that is at the front of the anatomy, directly above the vulva, and it is often one of the portions that is actually covered with pubic hair. Labia majora are on the outside, labia minora are on the inside, and they produce what are often referred to as the vaginal lips, or other things along those lines. Breasts are also considered portions of the female anatomy, largely due to the production of mammary, or of having mammary glands, which allows for the production of milk. Here is an anatomical drawing. You can see a variety of these different types of things that are going on. The endometrial lining here inside of the uterus is what grows throughout the hormone cycle and then sheds off. Broad ligaments kind of create a cape of structure surrounding the uterus. The uterus is actually much smaller than most people tend to think that it is. And the ovary, I mean, one of the major problems is that you can see all of this here, but it's not a very large size. Cervix is at the opening of the uterus, where the uterus and the vagina come in contact with each other. The cervix also is one of the main indicators when one is ready to get to give birth, and it goes and enlarges, and actually the opening shrinks surrounding the cervix. When we're talking about hormonal cycling, here's an image that works decently well. Day 1 is at the first day of menstruation, and then it keeps on going from there. You can see the variety of different types of changes that occur. So the beginning of follicular development. So the follicle is a portion that ends up releasing an egg, so it provides some of the nutrients to allow the ovulation to occur. That occurs due to a spike in luteinizing hormone, which then ends up making it so that there is a large amount of liquid actually that ends up coming in. And that spike in luteinizing hormone is due to a rise in estrogen or estradiol. See two different terms depending on what you're talking about. Following this, the corpus luteum or corpus luteum, which means the yellow body. So luteum or luteum means yellow. Corpus meaning body. The corpus luteum secretes progesterone. Progesterone ends up increasing the amount of endometrial lining that there is in the uterus. So as that grows, it gets ready to grab onto that egg that has been fertilized following ovulation, and then goes from there. There's also changes in body temperature. They're relatively slight, and it depends on the individual themselves. In that process of insemination, sperm will swim their way up. There's a large number of sperm that will end up getting to the area, and they'll start secreting a number of different types of enzymes that will help break down some of the outer coating on the egg. The egg actually, or the ovum actually plays a much more active role than what was once thought, which it ends up going and taking in the sperm and creating a fusion with the sperm to become then the zygote. So ovum, sperm, together, zygote. This fertilization actually occurs in the fallopian tube, and that can actually lead to a number of different types of issues. So if implantation ends up occurring later, but it also takes about 5 days or so for the ovum to make its way down to the uterus to be able to see what it can actually do. So the actual timing of everything takes a fair amount of time to get from ovulation, which will occur at 14 days post beginning of menstruation, until there's actual implantation in the endometrial wall, which is one of the reasons why ovulation occurs, and then generally it takes about 2 weeks or so for the body to realize, oh, nope, nothing has actually happened. Now, the zygote itself, or the blastocyst at that point, is going to also produce progesterone and a similar type of hormone called human chorionic gonadotropin, which will help maintain the uterine lining and actually expand it and expand the uterus to be able to provide even more energy and nutrients for the growing child. Pregnancy and birth have a whole lot of other terms that are associated with them. Generally, the whole field is called obstetrics, or OB, which is where you end up getting OBGYN. The OB is obstetrics, so the birthing side. The GYN is gynecology, which is the general vaginal health side of things. So pregnancy is a temporary condition that lasts from the point of conception through birth. The normal term is about 40 weeks. It's weird to think about because that 40 weeks actually begins at the first day of the last missed period. So that technically means that you're considered pregnant for about 2 weeks before you are actually pregnant, which is weird. So it gets complicated. In any way, it's about 40 weeks with that can be broken up into 3 10-week-long trimesters. Generally, during the first 10 weeks, there are a large number of major developmental time points that end up occurring to ensure viability, and only about 2/3 of all implantations or actually last past 10 weeks of age. From 10 weeks to 20 weeks, there's a lot of different types of things that occur that are the development of many of the major organs in the growing fetus. And then from 20 weeks to 30 weeks, you generally have a fully functional type of creature inside of you for the most part. A little bit of fine tuning of a number of different types of organs, and then just larger growth. So once again, when we're talking about those first 10 to 12 weeks, the first 12 weeks of or following conception, we have the growth of an actual human being. At 5 weeks. The embryo, so before 5 weeks, it's really just a very, very small creature. The embryonic stage begins at 3 weeks. The fetal stage begins at 9 weeks. So it isn't until about the 9th week when you actually have all of the organs that are in place. Which is often why, if you're even looking for a heartbeat or something else, it's not detectable until about 9 to 12 weeks post-fertilization. At 14 weeks, all of the blood vessels are visible through the skin. Muscle tissue and skeleton are forming to help create an actual fetus. 20 weeks, the skin is less transparent, and fingernails and toenails have started to develop. Hair is also beginning to cover the head. Generally, around 20 weeks is when you have your anatomy ultrasound, which is to generally check to make sure that the anatomical structures are all in place and everything is growing properly. This is also often when you can first determine whether you are having a biological male or biological female, which then leads to a variety of other different types of things. As you keep moving forward from there, generally a fetus is considered to be fully formed and able to be birthed following about week 22. Between week 22 and week 26, there's a lot of development that actually occurs, generally with lungs and with the skin. So prior to week 22, the skin tends to be very tacky and can fall apart and tear very easily. Following week 22, then it starts hardening up and actually can make it so that it's much more easy to birth and have a successful birth. It's not to say that you can't have a successful birth before week 26 or so, but it just makes it so that it's much more difficult. Generally, when you hit that 26-week point, then that means that you have much more of a chance of having a fully functioning child. When you end up actually getting to pregnancy, pregnancy itself is divided into 4 stages. The prenatal stage is from conception up until labor. Labor is during the time during which contractions move the fetus down into the birth canal and expel it. Parturition is the time period of actually actively giving birth, and postpartum is the 6 weeks following birth, when everything kind of goes back to a regular, more or less, pre-pregnant state. Once again, with this whole entire chapter and many of the other chapters in this book, there's a lot of information that I'm skimming over, largely just so that you have at least the basic anatomical and physiological knowledge so that you can actually hear some of these different types of terms and get to know them yourself. There's a lot going on in here, and pregnancy is one of those very complex types of things that we really don't actually get much time to talk about in our curriculum. So if you have any questions about the words or terminology that you end up getting hung up on, then please reach out and talk to me. Otherwise, good luck. See you later.